Israel is not waiting for Trump, but rather, the IDF is preparing to strike Hamas hard even before he takes office. The tactics are already changing, and Defense Minister Israel Katz has ordered the IDF to prepare an all-out effort to defeat Hamas if the hostage release negotiations fail. In the north, IDF aircrafts attacked Hezbollah targets throughout Lebanon on Sunday evening, including sites along the Syria-Lebanon border. Hezbollah threatened retaliation, and for the first time, the leaders of Syria and Lebanon met in Damascus. In America, Vice President-elect J.D. Vance gave journalists details of the plans that the incoming Trump administration has for the hostages' release, including a threat to authorize the IDF to wipe out the remaining Hamas brigades in Gaza, alongside unprecedented economic sanctions on terrorist organizations in the Middle East. This puts a lot of additional pressure on Turkey and Qatar, who are acting as intermediaries in the hostage release talks, because it will greatly affect them as well. Speaking of Turkey, President Erdogan has taken issue with an Iranian plan to send 1,500 kamikaze UAVs to Kurdish forces in Syria. This development is concerning for Israel as well, since it means that an old ally of ours is beginning to drift into the Iranian orbit. All of this might already have an effect, because Hamas made a major concession in the last 24 hours, and all of a sudden, 33 hostages are on the table in the deal. Israeli officials are now working to determine how many are still alive and how many Palestinian security prisoners will be released in exchange for them. There's a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what's happening in Israel on day 464 of the war with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and all the Shia militias in Iraq. All of them are acting under the auspices of Iran, the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. 1 second before we begin, I'd like to invite you to click on the subscribe button if you haven't already, so that you'll never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. I'd also like to introduce you to our sponsor for today's video, Vinia. This is not just another dietary supplement. It's an all-natural energy booster that uses the fruit of the vine to help your body do everything it needs to do even better. I'll tell you more about this amazing product, which I use myself, later in the program. But first, the news. We'll start with Boots on the Ground reports from the Gaza Strip. The Nahal Brigade, under the guidance of the Brigade Fire Directorate, was very busy over the last 24 hours, attacking booby-trap buildings and weapons depots of the Hamas terrorist organization in the northern zone of the Gaza Strip. Also yesterday, our aircraft attacked the Halawa terror headquarters in Jabalia, which in the past and still today serves as a command and control center for the terrorists to plan and carry out terrorist attacks. Defense Minister Israel Katz instructed the IDF to prepare an all-out effort to defeat Hamas if the hostage release negotiations fail. In simple terms, the IDF is required to prepare to open the gates of hell on Gaza and Hamas. After more than a year of cleaning operations that mostly focused on finding the underground tunnels and bunkers, capturing weapons and ammunition, and removing them from the strip so that Hamas could no longer use them, and engaging with Hamas terrorists where they could be found, the IDF will now actively hunt down and destroy these Hamas units once and for all. In the IDF, they are also considering the possibility of halting humanitarian aid that is entering Gaza. This is a step that no one wanted to take, but it turns out that you can't supply a lifeline to the civilians of Gaza without also supplying a lifeline to Hamas terrorists. In fact, Hamas ends up stealing most of the aid, and they use it as a bribe to recruit new members from the young men in Gaza who have no other way of getting food for their families. And furthermore, officials in the IDF say that the last time Israel prevented the entry of aid, it caused Hamas to become flexible and work towards concluding the first deal to release hostages. The second critical matter is speeding up shipments of munitions from the United States to the IDF, with an emphasis on heavy and medium bombs. This is necessary not only to finish off Hamas in Gaza, but because the Air Force has been very busy in the north over the last few months, destroying Hezbollah's arsenal in Lebanon and all the strategic assets left behind by the Assad regime in Syria. That's not to mention taking out most of Iran's air defense infrastructure and ballistic missile production capability. They've also carried out strikes against the Houthis in Yemen, which, by the way, is a big favor to the Americans and the Europeans, who need the Houthis to stop menacing shippings in the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandab Straits. So altogether, the Israeli Air Force has been doing a lot of heavy lifting in the defense of the civilized world in the past several months, and now they are in need of having their ammunition stocks replenished because there might be even more heavy lifting to do in the near future. Back on the ground in Gaza, IDF sources say that several targets are on the table. However, the critical area is Bet Hanun. The maneuver there is crucial to restore security for Israel's communities that are adjacent to the Gaza Strip and for the city of Sderot. And since it began more than 2 weeks ago, 11 soldiers have been killed and about 20 wounded. This is all the more frustrating for the IDF because this area was cleared of Hamas activity in the early stages of the war, but the IDF left it to go on to other areas, and now, after almost a year, they had to go back because Hamas has managed to regroup in that location. These terrorists had prepared for the IDF's return and were ready with booby traps, improvised explosive devices, and other nasty surprises. They also set up a vast network of cameras to monitor the IDF's movements so they could be ambushed with hit-and-run tactics, anti-tank missiles, and snipers. This has left the Gaza division to adopt new tactics to reduce the risk to its soldiers, including an increase in operations at night, where they will have an advantage because they have night vision equipment that Hamas does not have. However, despite the IDF's advantages, the intelligence echelon estimates that the fighting in Bet Hanun may continue for weeks until the Hamas battalion operating above and underground there is defeated. Here at TBN Israel, we will keep updating you on every development in the war against Hamas and the terrorist organizations that are operating in Gaza. Before we continue to developments in the hostage release negotiations, let's briefly touch upon the other fronts of Israel's fighting. But first, I want to call on you to help us spread the truth. Share our videos on YouTube and subscribe to our channel. We need every subscriber to keep spreading the truth, and currently only 40% of our viewers are subscribers. So click on the subscribe button and stay tuned to the truth. Now shifting our focus to the northern arena. On Sunday evening, the IDF launched a series of strikes across Lebanon on military targets of the Hezbollah terrorist organization. The targets included launch sites for rockets, which threatened the Israeli home front and violated the ceasefire agreement in the north. Apparently, Hezbollah was preparing to hit Israeli communities with massive firepower, and they forgot what happened the last time they tried to do that, so Israel had to remind them why it was not a good idea. According to the IDF, the targets were attacked after their threat to the Israeli home front and to the IDF forces was reported to the oversight mechanism for implementing the understanding between Israel and Lebanon and was not addressed. The IDF spokesperson clarified, the IDF continues to act in order to remove any threat to the state of Israel and will prevent any attempt by the Hezbollah terrorist organization to re-establish and build up strength in accordance with the understandings of the ceasefire agreement. In other words, the IDF told the United Nations and the Lebanese National Army about these launch sites that Hezbollah was preparing, and the United Nations and the Lebanese National Army didn't do anything about it. So, the IDF had to take matters into its own hands. This is not the first time we've seen this sequence of events, and it probably won't be the last time. These strikes were also notable because they included the targeting of border crossings between Syria and Lebanon in the Bekaa Valley region. These crossings were being used to smuggle weapons and ammunition to Hezbollah, and Israel has said many times it will not allow this to continue. Hezbollah is threatening to retaliate for these strikes, and you can be sure that Israel will continue to guard against such retaliation. In other words, you've lost. It's pointless to continue fighting. If you get back and try and fight me again, I'll have to put you down again. And the next time, it will hurt a lot more. And I'll just keep doing that until you're completely broken and maybe even destroyed completely. This is essentially what Israel is saying to Hezbollah, and I think that they should take it seriously. Meanwhile, on Lebanon's political level, Syria's new ruler, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, and Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati declared their commitment to building stable relationship during Mikati's historic visit to Damascus on Sunday. Al-Julani stressed that the new Syria will remain neutral regarding Lebanon's affair and will try to resolve issues through dialogue. For his part, Mikati emphasized the need for mutual respect and national sovereignty in the new relations, noting that returning some 2 million Syrian refugees who have been in Lebanon for the last decade is an urgent and strategic issue for both countries. He also called for demarcating land and maritime borders between the two countries to advance regional and economic stability. This is a reference to the large reserves of natural gas which are believed to be underneath the coastal waters of Lebanon, which could provide money for both Syria and Lebanon, money that they need to rebuild. The big energy companies would like to go in and drill for these resources, but they can't do that as long as there is an ongoing conflict and instability. On that note, senior diplomats from the Middle East and Europe met on Saturday in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, to discuss supporting the reconstruction of Syria after the fall of the tyrant Bashar al-Assad. At the heart of the talks are Western sanctions on Syria, possibilities for humanitarian aid, and support for the political transition process in the country. Al-Julani is pushing for sanctions relief to aid the country's rebuilding after more than 13 years of war, and it is possible that this will happen in the coming months. However, European diplomats have said that lifting sanctions depends on forming a representative and inclusive government in Syria. In the meantime, German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock announced an additional 50 million euros in assistance for food, shelter, and medical care. For its part, Saudi Arabia, which had previously taken a clear stance against Assad, is signaling its willingness to support the country's reconstruction. Riyadh has sent humanitarian aid and continues discussions about expanding support. However, experts believe that challenges, including existing sanctions and the influence of countries like Turkey and Qatar, may complicate the implementation of regional initiatives. Here at TBN Israel, we will hope and pray for peace, but remain on guard, prepared for any development, and we ask you to continue to spread the truth about what's happening here in the Middle East. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to thank again the brave soldiers and security forces who continue fighting to keep Israel safe and work tirelessly to bring our hostages home. This past year, during my reserve service, I witnessed firsthand the sacrifices these recruits make, some of them even in their 30s and 40s, serving more than 200 days every year. It's an incredible commitment, but it's also a heavy burden, both emotionally and physically. For me, faith was my anchor. Praying every day gave me the strength to push forward. But I also found a practical boost in Vinya, an incredible Israeli innovation made from red grape cells. Vinya enhances blood flow to your heart, brain, and muscles, helping you feel more energetic, focused, and ready to take on the day. It's a natural way to support your body without the sugar or alcohol found in grapes. What's more, Vinya isn't just capsules. You can enjoy it as coffee or tea each morning, giving you a fresh, healthy start to your day. I used it daily during my service, and I still do. If you want to feel the difference for yourself, visit www.vinyatbnisrael.com or call 800-638-1944. Trust me, you won't regret it. Now, let's get back to the news, and for this segment, we'll shift our focus even further north to the new potential threat facing Israel, Turkey, which, in a very Middle Eastern twist of a narrative, is now also becoming an enemy of Iran. The first hint we get about this is a report in the Turkish newspaper Yeni Safak this week that Iran intends to supply 1,500 kamikaze drones to Kurdish forces in Syria. These are the same Kurdish forces, by the way, who are already supported by the Americans and have long had a quiet but mutual beneficial relationship with Israel. But once again, this is the Middle East, and Turkey and Iran are two rivals that avoid entering into direct military confrontation, opting instead to always make use of various proxy entities. In the past, Iran has not only tried to carry out various assassination attempts against certain secular figures inside Turkish territory, but we also remember that it supported the Kurdish underground organization, the PKK. This is a well-known Iranian method. Just look at the ring of fire that Iran built around Israel. It is important to understand that Iran is very irritated with Turkey for the crucial role it played in ousting their client, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, and they are now trying to make Turkey pay a price for that. Turkey is unlikely to act directly against Iran, but will instead take a stronger stance against the Kurds and behind the scenes continue diplomatically dealing with Iran. Needless to say, this could very easily get out of hand. Also, needless to say, that here at TBN Israel, we'll keep an eye open on everything that happens with Turkey and Iran. And meanwhile, before we get to the hottest topic ahead of Donald Trump's return to the United States presidency, I want to ask you to support our work. We need you so we can continue to spread the truth. Every donation helps us, so please go to tbnisrael.com/give or click the donation button on YouTube to help us keep doing what we do and share what's really happening in Israel so that you can pray for the situation. A delegation of senior Israeli officials is in Doha, Qatar at the moment after being sent by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with instructions to continue negotiations meant to finalize an agreement with Hamas for a ceasefire and a release of the remaining Israeli hostages. This decision was made in consultation with envoys from the outgoing Biden administration and the incoming Trump administration, who are already in Doha participating in talks with mediators from Qatar and Egypt. Everyone understands that the goal is to have a deal in place by January 20th, the day that Donald Trump will be inaugurated for his second term in the White House. Incoming Vice President J.D. Vance gave an exclusive interview with Fox News on Sunday evening in which he gave details about the real meaning behind Trump's threat that the gates of hell will be swung wide open if the hostages are not released by Inauguration Day.
If these hostages aren't back home by that date, all hell's going to break out.
Vance clarified that Trump's ultimatum consists of two major moves for the sake of freeing the hostages: granting full authorization to the IDF to eliminate the last remaining Hamas brigades in Gaza, and imposing aggressive sanctions and severe financial penalties on organizations that support terrorism in the Middle East. According to foreign reports, Vance did not elaborate on the financial sanctions planned by the incoming Trump administration against Hamas. However, the Biden administration has already imposed a series of sanctions on the organization and even issued arrest warrants against some of its leaders, so it's likely that these new sanctions will be ever harsher. Vance also added, in a veiled critique of the Biden administration, that this kind of approach is actually doing the job of American leadership, something Donald Trump did very well for 4 years, and he's going to do it very well for the next 4 years. It's well known that the IDF indicated it hasn't yet finished eliminating all 24 of Hamas's brigades in the Gaza Strip due to concern for killing the 98 hostages still held in central area of Gaza. Vance further expressed hope that the hostage deal might be reached in the final days of Biden's presidency, maybe in the last day or two of the administration. And that progress in the negotiations stems from fear of the consequences Trump will impose on Hamas and its supporters. But after offering this brief acknowledgement of the Democratic administration, Vance returned to emphasizing that no matter when the deal actually comes into effect, it will be born of Hamas's absolute fear of the harsh consequences that will be imposed on it if the hostages aren't freed. Meaning, even if the Biden administration reaches the desired agreement, Vance says that the credit belongs to Trump, who instilled dread in those holding the captives and their partners regarding his imminent return, through his repeated statements about opening the gates of hell. Mike Waltz, Trump's incoming national security advisor, ratcheted up the rhetoric on another occasion, saying there will be consequences for anyone who thinks they can abduct an American. From now on, any harm to Americans abroad will come at a steep price. Significant progress has been reported in negotiations for the release of Israeli hostages held by Hamas. A senior source revealed that a finalized draft of the agreement has been shared with both Israel and Hamas. This development comes after late-night discussions in Doha between representatives from Israel, Hamas, Qatar, and United States envoy Steve Witkoff, who is mediating on behalf of the incoming Trump administration. The first phase of the agreement would see Hamas release 33 hostages in exchange for the release of 48 prisoners previously re-incarcerated after the Gilad Shalit deal. 200 prisoners serving life sentences and approximately 1,000 additional detainees, including women, children, and ill prisoners. The deal also includes the return of bodies of fallen Israeli soldiers and humanitarian aid into Gaza. Additionally, there are ongoing discussions about relocating some released prisoners to third countries. Key logistical points in the deal address Israel's withdrawal from several strategic areas in northern Gaza while maintaining control over a 1-kilometer security buffer along its border. The process will unfold over 42 days, with guarantees that Israel will not resume military actions during this phase provided Hamas complies with the terms. Officials describe the recent negotiations in Doha as a breakthrough, facilitated by Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed El-Tahini. However, the deal's finalization depends on Hamas's approval, which remains uncertain. Israeli negotiators emphasize maximizing the number of hostages released while maintaining national security. Critics, including Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, have expressed strong opposition, labeling the deal as a catastrophe for national security. Smotrich and other opponents argue against releasing high-profile terrorists and halting military operations in Gaza, warning it could embolden Hamas. Families of the hostages have expressed mixed feelings. While some support the deal as a step towards ending their nightmare, others criticize its partial nature, fearing it will leave many loved ones behind. Public protests and call for the unconditional release of all hostages continue to intensify pressure on the government. With gaps still to be bridged, Israeli negotiators remain in Doha to finalize the terms. The international mediation team, including representatives from the United States and Qatar, remains optimistic about reaching a resolution within days as both sides weigh the deal's potential impact. Now, switching our focus to another front in this war, the IDF released footage and audio recordings on Sunday from the strikes last Friday on the Iranian-backed Houthi terrorist regime in Yemen. The strike was carried out in light of repeated attacks by the Houthi terror regime against the State of Israel, its citizens, and against civilian infrastructure in the country, including the launching of UAVs and ballistic missiles towards Israeli territory. Among the targets attacked were facilities at the Hijaz power station, which serves as a central power infrastructure for the Houthi regime terrorist military activity. In addition, infrastructures in the Ras Isa and Hodeidah ports on Yemen's western coastline were also attacked. These targets illustrate the military use made by the Houthi terror regime of civilian facilities for terror. On Friday, the IDF spokesperson's unit said that the Houthi terror regime constitutes a central branch of Iranian terror and brings about the undermining of regional order and the disruption of global maritime freedom. The Houthi terror regime operates as an independent terror entity relying on coordination and Iranian funding in order to harm the State of Israel and its citizens. The IDF will continue to act powerfully and strike anyone who poses a threat to Israeli citizens at any distance required. As always, here at TBN Israel, we'll keep updating you on all the developments in that farthest theater from Israel, and we ask you to join us in praying against all these terror organizations that torture and murder millions of people in the Middle East. While we're praying against terrorism, let's also pray in favor of truth and righteousness, and for the protection of the innocent. Let's pray together for the IDF soldiers that are defending our country in the ground, in the air, and at sea. And let's pray for the safety of the hostages that are held in the Gaza Strip by Hamas. Let's pray for them to come home fast. And to help you pray for these hostages, I'd like to give you some personal details about one of them, Doron Steinbrecher, a 30-year-old veterinarian nurse from Kibbutz Kfar Aza near the Gaza border. She is known for her compassionate and nurturing nature. Her deep love for animals and dedication to their care have been central to her personal and professional life. Her family describes her as a warm and caring individual, always putting the needs of others before her own. Her vibrant personality and infectious smile have left a lasting impression on those who know her. On October 7, 2023, during a Hamas attack on Kibbutz Kfar Aza, Doron was abducted from her home. She had been in contact with her family and during the attack informed them of the imminent danger before communication was lost. Her family continues to advocate for her release, appealing to both national and international communities for assistance. Her mother, Simona, has been particularly vocal, urging for increased efforts to secure Doron's freedom. So please pray for the people of Israel, and most importantly, do not forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And together, we will win this war because God is on our side. Hello, this is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. Through the support of partners like you, TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news and what God is doing in this land. Please visit TBN Israel online today at tbn.org/Israel.